What is up, ladies and gentlemen, and beautiful people of the Crasher community? How are you guys doing today? We're back with a new video on the channel. Thank you very much for tuning on in, you absolute legends. That thank you was a nod to Chad Gable, who really should be going to WrestleMania to fight Gunther for the IC Championship. You know what I'm saying? He needs to finish his story, just like my man Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare. So, with that unrelated tangent out of the way, what we have here is rather intriguing. Pokemon Go ticket prices aren't actually that bad. Now, one of the biggest reasons why this right here stands out to me is that this right here is kind of like antithetical to what my side of the argument is when it comes to the whole debate with Pokemon Go, with Niantic and all that stuff. I'm not going to rehash everything because I have a catalog of videos calling out Niantic and addressing multiple things revolving around Niantic and Pokemon Go, but this right here, I guess you could say this article is sort of like playing devil's advocate, which is something that I actually really like. I can appreciate this. So let's begin with this. The upcoming Pokemon Go season ticket prices have fans infuriated, with many refusing to spend the $7.99 required to unlock certain research tasks and rewards, but it's not as bad as everyone thinks. At its core, Pokemon Go is a live service, ever-changing experience with hundreds of Pokemon taking their place in the game and hundreds still waiting to join. As such, it manages to keep its fans on their toes with countless events, releases, and tasks required to catch them all. However, with Pokemon Go being a free game, Niantic has to make their money somehow, so they can keep bringing in new features and updates. Unfortunately, that requires a few hefty microtransactions, which has the community reeling, especially after so many paid events released in the first part of 2024. However, they're not quite as bad as some are making them out to be. Okay, so just the opening 3 paragraphs right there already offers a pretty interesting take on things. Now, let's be realistic here. Niantic is a company, and like every single other company on the earth, they need to make money somehow. That right there, I think we can all be in agreement with. But one of the biggest parts that gets people so upset and so critical towards Niantic is the ways they go about it. And one of the ways that they go about it, funnily enough, revolves around the implementation of these paid ticketed events. Now, back in the earlier times of Pokemon Go, whenever there were new releases for new batches of Pokemon, you could find them out in the wild. But now it's like you have to spend money to even have a chance of encountering them, such as with them being egg-locked. So in order for you to encounter these Pokemon, you have to hatch them, and even still, the hatch chances of those Pokemon aren't really all that great. And another point to address here would be the fact that Niantic has to make their money somehow, yet unironically, they killed one of their biggest, most lucrative aspects about Pokemon Go. That, of course, revolving around remote raid passes. Ever since the nerf to remote raid passes, man, the game has been dropping. I mean, there were a lot of people that were really upset about it, and rightfully so. And yet, despite their resistance, despite their feedback, Niantic just completely tripled down, swept all of that under the rug. They tripled down on their stubbornness and their stupidity revolving around their decisions. And that's why there is some speculation revolving around all of this, such as the increase of the amounts of paid ticketed events, because Niantic is financially desperate. They are trying to recoup whatever potential money that they could have made, but ended up losing as a result of them being tone deaf when it comes to the situation revolving around remote raid passes and not accepting the feedback and all of that stuff. So they are trying so hard to just like hand out buckets worth of paid content, hoping that people will be nostalgic enough when it comes to Pokemon, because it's a nostalgia device when it comes to Niantic. They're hoping that people will buy into these events and be able to get that money that they oh so desperately need. As previously mentioned, Pokemon Go is a live service game. It's forever changing with the new seasons, events, and additions constantly arriving. As such, Niantic needs to make enough money to pay their developers and staff in order to provide the experience many players know and love. We'll get to that in a moment. Sure, that can result in a few pricier tickets for events, but when you compare that to the likes of Overwatch, Call of Duty, Valorant, and even CSGO, the microtransactions feel like a pittance. Okay, tough take, we'll get to that as well. First of all, you have to pay for COD, and then you can purchase skins, battle passes, and so much more, with many forking out hundreds. Gee, I kinda wonder why. In the grand scheme of that, $7.99 doesn't seem like too much to enjoy the release of a rare Pokemon and some new tasks, all of which come with rewards. Okay, so first let's address this right here. So, you know, they're talking about the additions of, you know, seasons, events, and, you know, it's all constantly arriving and stuff like that. But you see, like I had mentioned before, back in the earlier stages of Pokemon Go, whenever there were new releases of Pokemon, they were not hidden behind a pay gate of sorts, okay? But nowadays, it seems like that is exactly what is happening, you know what I'm saying? And even if back then there were some Pokemon that were hidden behind pay gates, such as legendary raid Pokemon, back then it was more worth it because at least back then the game was more fun and it seemed like Niantic actually gave somewhat of a shit about their players. So also they wanted to, you know, list other games as an example to further strengthen their point, which, you know, I can appreciate. I can, you know, accept that and all that stuff. But you also got to understand that there are nuance and caveats when it comes to each of these games. I mean, Pokemon Go, yes, it's free to play, but it's essentially pay to win. Like, that's how a lot of people are looking at the game, and that's how I look at it too, because there's a lot of aspects, especially nowadays when it comes to the game, that unless you want to be a free-to-play player, you're not going to be able to experience a whole lot of these new experiences unless you're willing to fork money over. Now, I do have to point out, in complete transparency and fairness, I don't really know too much about these games like Overwatch, Call of Duty, Valorant, etc., as much as I know about Pokemon Go. So, you know, there might be some details here that I don't know about that would make these comparisons completely valid. And I'm not saying they're invalid, but I guess we'll say even more valid, if you know what I mean. But the thing is that when it comes to Pokemon Go, there are a lot of moving parts. You are always having new releases, new features, you know, of some kind always being released, and there's a lot of people that would like to have access to these features and, you know, these new releases and stuff like that. But in order for that to happen, well, they gotta spend money for it. Whereas something like Overwatch, Call of Duty, a lot of, like, the, you know, first-person shooter games, like, they're more straight ahead. They're more straightforward. And to finally wrap up this last point right here, I'm thinking that maybe the reason why these people are willing to fork out hundreds of dollars when it comes to the example of COD is because maybe, just maybe, they're not being ripped off like in comparison to, say, Pokemon Go players are being ripped off. I mean, there have been countless examples of Pokemon Go players being ripped off and pissed off because of events that essentially are nothing more than scams. I mean, I've covered that on my channel several times. Like, there's been events, there's been new releases that have come off as nothing more than money-grubbing scams. And two big examples that I can list off here when it comes to scams in Pokemon Go, one would be Dragon Week, where Shiny Dino was the poster child of Dragon Week, but yet people were having such a blisteringly hard time even trying to hatch a regular dino, let alone a shiny dino. And the second example revolves around the Galarian Mr. Mime paid research event. For the sake of one Pokemon and the price that people had to pay in order to encounter that Pokemon was absolutely ridiculous. With that in mind, what makes Pokemon Go any different from these strategies? Well, another thing that I can point out here is that aside from all of the things I already pointed out above, would be the fact that Niantic has a history, and not a good history. Their history is plagued with many of the don'ts, what never to do when it comes to being a company. That being completely brushing off community and player feedback, that being giving people garbage events that are not worth the bang for their buck. paywalling things that were once free features and mechanics in the game. I mean, I could keep going. Like I said, I'm not going to rehash on everything. I don't want to make this video already longer than what it is. So, to remind you guys, I have a catalog of videos that document various subjects revolving around Niantic and Pokemon Go. So, we'll just leave it at that for now. They all have to make money in the same way, and the shop and tickets are how Niantic is implementing their system. But you see, one of the biggest points of criticism is how they are implementing their system. So, with that being said, let's carry on. It goes without saying that purchasing Pokemon Go tickets is an optional aspect of the game. Yes, you are absolutely objectively correct. It is 100% an optional aspect of the game. But when we take a look at the caveats and the nuance around these Pokemon Go tickets, some of them revolve around content that should be accessible to free-to-play players as they once were, such as new encounters like I had mentioned. Now, when we're talking about the more grandiose tickets that revolve around Pokemon Tour events like Hoenn, Sinnoh, etc., Pokemon Go Fest, things like that, those are on a more grander scale. And typically, those tickets right there revolve around more heftier and more valuable content. So it should go without saying that with that in mind right there, it's obviously going to get people, you know, more pumped. It's going to get their juices flowing, and they're probably going to want to dip in and, you know, want to buy one of these tickets to enjoy the event for what it can potentially be, provided, of course, there are no glitches or anything to screw it up for the player experience. Or another funny instance would be to have Niantic shift blame from themselves, accountability from themselves, and put the blame on the players, even though it's up to Niantic to make sure that the event is facilitated in a manner in which it is not only convenient for the players, but also stable all around for the players. More casual players will usually find the experience entirely enjoyable without the need to spend any money. Well, for one, I would like to see some examples of players that currently are enjoying the aspects of the game without the need to spend any money. And also another thing is that back in the day, back in the younger days of Pokemon Go, the experience was way more entirely enjoyable without the need to spend money. I mean, let me give you a personal story here. I'm not going to try and take too much time here, but to kind of make a long story short, back in 2016, even to like 2017, there were hundreds, if not thousands of players that I would walk by that would be playing Pokemon Go, crowding streets, crowding harbors, crowding sidewalks, and things like that. The game was much more enjoyable back in the day, and that was when we were at a more formative stage of Pokemon Go, and the need to spend money was like at a zero in comparison to how things are now. Naturally, those more interested and eager to maximize what they can get out of the game will find it necessary to buy the tickets and get access to the exclusive Pokemon, but it's never a forced deal for anyone. Well, in fairness, when it comes to things like the, the Pokemon Go Tour events, Go Fest, things like that, it's more understandable as to why their content is more elusive and more paid-gated, because it is a major event, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, like, as a way for it to be in defense of Niantic, but that's just me being objective. I gotta give, credit where credit is due. I gotta give fact where fact is due. But it works both ways. There are also other instances, like I had mentioned before, that shouldn't be hidden behind a pay gate. FOMO is real, or fear of missing out, and losing out on certain aspects of a game can be extremely frustrating, especially when the prices feel out of reach. But as it goes with many other games, paid or not, a balance is important and spending extra is always optional. Can't exactly argue with that there. I agree with that take. Regardless of its optional nature or comparison to other titles, it would be wrong to just criticize the players for the cost of tickets, something that's entirely in the hands of Niantic. $7.99 is pretty pricey for a ticket that only really gives you one extra Pokemon. Again, another take I agree with, because number one, I mean, as much as I have, you know, given my opinions about players that, you know, claim to be against what Niantic is doing and claim to boycott the game, yet they reward Niantic by giving them money for events like these, I've been critical about that, but at the end of the day, it's up to the player. It's the player's choice as to what they want to do with the game and with themselves. And also, it's definitely not the player's fault that Niantic puts out these egregious events with even more egregious prices to try and, you know, make it seem like that, you know, this event is completely worth it, even though this event, like it's highlighted here, you know, gives you really one extra Pokemon. I mean, spending $8 for that one extra Pokemon, come on. I think you can spend that $8 on 100 other things that is more productive and more worth your money and time than for something like that. But anyways, let's carry on here. With that in mind, there could be a new way for Niantic to handle these events and distribution of tickets or payments. Okay, well, here's a concept that universally works there, Niantic. I don't know if you ever watch videos of people being critical of you, or just, you know, pay attention to those that kiss and wipe your arses, but here's a concept, here's a new way that universally works. Listen to your players. Actually learn to give a shit about what your players think and what they want in terms of feedback on how the game can be universally improved for everyone. And guess what? With everyone being happy, you get more money. It's a win-win situation in that instance, you know what I'm saying? But the fact that Niantic just seemingly is so, like, self-destructive, so stubborn, so just tone-deaf, it's like they want Pokemon Go to die, you know? Like, with all of the things that are adding up here, I mean, like, I will be damn surprised if Pokemon Go lasts longer than what it already has, all things considered. Coins are an ideal way to use an existing currency to pay for in-game tickets. Now, I want to point something out here. Yes, there is a free method when it comes to getting Pokecoins for Pokemon Go. Now, that is if you are very lucky, if everything is coordinated and timed right. You can get a maximum of 50 coins, and the method behind that would be revolving around putting your Pokemon in gyms and have them be defended for at least, I think it's 8 hours, unless they changed that, I don't know. But I do remember, last I checked, that it was a maximum of 50 Pokecoins a day, if you are lucky, which is a rather small amount for something so tedious in comparison. Whereas, say, if you go on the Pokeshop with a couple clicks of a button, you can buy yourself thousands of Pokecoins at the expense of your wallet, mind you. So that's also kind of another thing that I'm really critical about when it comes to Niantic, is just the really, really slim chance of naturally getting Pokecoins without the need to dip into your wallet. There should be either a huge overhaul when it comes to how you can earn Pokecoins in the Pokemon Go game, or there should be an increased amount of Pokecoins that you get the longer that you leave your Pokemon in the gym defending it. In Call of Duty, you can use COD points to buy the next Battle Pass. In Pokemon Go, you could use the coins to purchase the tickets, making players jump into the game and use the gyms more often to save more money. Sure, it might end up a little more grindy, but it's a way for fans to engage in the content and the new Pokemon without feeling blocked by a paywall. Now, they actually kind of addressed the point that I had previously ended up making, so kudos for that. And it is a good way to engage in the game more, but again, it's very tedious, and it's almost not even worth it, especially when, like I said, if you are lucky, the maximum amount of Pokemon coins that you get in the run of a day is 50. Ultimately, Pokemon Go ticket prices are entirely optional, and it's up to the players to buy or refuse them. Sure, new Pokemon and events are fun, but they're not the be-all or end-all of the game, and while Niantic do need to change their ways, thank you very much for pointing that out, at least it's not as expensive as some other similar titles. And I think we can be fair here that, yes, Niantic is not the only offender here in that scenario, but they're a very prominent offender, an offender that we have covered a lot here on this channel. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that right there brings us to the end of the video, and it's gonna be really interesting to see how long the video turns out to be once it's done being chopped up and edited and all that stuff. But with that being said, though, ladies and gentlemen, this right here was actually, like, kind of a relief to talk about, because this right here not only offered sort of like the devil's advocate sort of perspective, but also it wasn't completely ignorant to the facts and the realities when it comes to the criticisms levied towards Niantic. So I gotta give whoever wrote this article out massive kudos, Jessica Philby. Thank you, Jessica, very much for this article. So what are your guys' thoughts and opinions about what we discussed here in today's video? Do you agree with my takes? Do you disagree with my takes? And also, let me know your guys' perspective, you know, if you guys are still playing Pokemon Go. I would like to know your guys' perspective on the game currently in 2024. With that being said, guys, that's it here for the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your time as well in viewing this video. Have yourself a damn good one, you beautiful people. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I'll see you guys next time.